We're live.
Mm.
Hi,
Hi.
Nisha.
Hi, hi.
How you doing?
I'm okay. How are you?
Okay. Um, it's sort of gray and the weather is kind of weird.
Is it rainy?
It rained last night,
Okay.
and then it's been this weird cloudy thing. Looks a bit cloudy where you are too.
Not particularly, but maybe, yeah, I guess.
Okay, so let's go into what I think might be an interesting chat today.
Mm.
I sent you three links.
Yep.
And it just happened because they entered my timeline algorithm or whatever. And I thought, oh, this is kind of interesting to actually think about this because
Right.
the first one I sent you was about is it Bukit Gasing? Right?
Yara.
About Bukit Kiara, which I know
Yeah.
you know something about. So I just wanted to check, oh, do you know anything about this? Because I'd not heard about this.
So the first
So we'll,
article was about the Jabatan Landscape Negara, which is the National Landscape Department,
yeah,
um, pushing through a proposal about uh,
they want to
literally cutting
develop
down
it
all the
basically.
trees. Yeah, cutting
Yeah.
down all the trees and putting in new trees.
Yeah.
And
Okay. So we'll
definitely,
we'll get into it. Let's get
yeah,
into it. Let me put the whole
yeah,
context. So that was one,
yeah,
and I thought that was interesting because that was like a change.org kind of a thing. That means someone um who is fluent in sort of civil society pushback, knows how to create a change.org form, uh, knows that there's an audience for this. I think there's something like 5,000 people who've signed it.
signatories. Yeah.
So by the way, all these things are placed below for the viewer. So I thought that was quite interesting. That's one kind of, the thing is, I'm interested is, I think in general, people don't, people think that things are being taken care of, and actually things are not being taken care of. Things are, people are taking advantage of things. Things are being done in the dark, behind the
Yeah.
scenes, all that kind of stuff. So who actually speaks up about it? Who shines a light on it? So this is one of
Yeah.
them. This
Yeah.
is I think this sort of represents community to me. It's like a community of people who are kind of know what's going on and are trying to do something about it. Then the
Yeah.
second link I sent you was actually an interesting one written by an artist in Penang who I've actually met, Rebecca.
Mm.
Um, and she's talking about something I see. I mean, I don't live in Penang, so I don't, I'm not
Mm.
in direct contact with all of this. But I see, there's a lot of development which seems unnecessary going on in Penang.
Mm.
It's also very different. I mean, most places with beautiful scenery and great environment wouldn't be doing any of this kind of development. And the reason it interests me because it's exactly the same as in Johor Bahru. They do the same kind of thing. Why do you want to build why do you want to block your views, contaminate your water, ruin your environment, you know? I
Right.
mean, I know why. It's because they want a sea view. They want property with sea view, so it's added value. So in that case in particular, I thought it was quite interesting. Who is speaking up is actually someone from the creative community who is articulate. Okay, so she's quite articulate. She spends a lot of time abroad. So her worldview is she understands about these things in a sort of a broader sense of outrage or this is the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. And you compare that to a local who actually never questions stuff like this. A lot of locals just allow these things to just happen. And there's also this counter narrative that any kind of development is prosperity. Why do you want to talk against prosperity? Okay. So that's another kind of area of interest I thought. And we'll get into that. Another third link was actually um, almost like an editorial piece written by written by I know him as Heng. His full name is Heng Kia Chun.
Oh,
He's
Greenpeace.
from Greenpeace.
Greenpeace
Yeah,
Transboundary Haze. Yeah,
and you've met him, right? Regional
yeah. I know him.
campaign strategist.
Yeah,
And his is actually like an editorial piece. It's an open letter. It's
yeah,
published on the Greenpeace site. I think sometimes they will find an avenue to publish it, like maybe on a like a bikini or something like that. And it's an open letter to YB Datuk Sri Johari Abuzani, the Minister of Environment, right? It's the environment,
the new Minister of Environment.
the new Minister of Environment. Okay. And he's talking about, very lucidly and very intelligently about the problem, this ongoing problem with haze, which never seems to be fully resolved. It sort of disappears a little bit and then it rears its head again. And okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is because I think our role is also to describe the playing field, and I think this describes a playing field of people pushing back, which is a sort of a social, civil society community group, a
Mm,
private individual who's articulate and is
mm,
able to actually write quite articulately about a problem and is actually seeing a problem, whereas maybe the a general public does not see it as a problem. And then finally, someone who is actually in the business of pushback. And it's Heng is quite interesting because I met him many, many years ago when he was the first employee for Greenpeace. And he actually reached out to me because he found me online, Johor Green.
right.
And I guess then there's almost nobody else talking about issues and stuff like that. So we arranged a meeting in KL, he was on his motorbike. We had lunch or something. But I thought it's so interesting that, and I've kept in touch. So this was like, say, 20, somewhere between 2012 and 2015, maybe something like
Right.
that. Okay. And he was, and I could see his personal progress working with Greenpeace, how he developed
Yeah.
language,
Mm,
you know, he developed
yeah.
a sense of, a sense of, a broader sense of ethics and, uh, climate justice, things like that.
Right.
He was also going for like meetings in Southeast Asia. So he's meeting other people like him. So he's actually becoming more educated about it.
Yeah.
I could see he was also getting more educated about how he should and should not speak because, he's actually now representing an
You're,
international
you're no longer
organization.
your own opinion. You are
Yep.
a representation of a brand, and you're also representing people who are victims of the effect.
So
So
they don't want
that's
to
very
get in trouble with the
aligned.
government. They don't want to get
Yes.
their NGO into trouble. So that's quite interesting,
Yep.
quite an interesting balancing act. And,
Yep.
I think you and I also sometimes have to figure out, it's like, when is it our role or time to say something and how,
Yeah.
you know?
Yep. Yep.
Like I've written pieces that got published in, Malaysia Kini or Free Malaysia Today or whatever.
Yeah.
And I've kind of not really done much more. One of them is because it's a tough gig. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just hard to get people on your side, what's your general thing about this?
I feel whether it is the case in Penang or the case in TTDI, Rimba Kiara, or even transboundary haze, which affects us all in Peninsula because the winds push our way, right? In that season. At the end of the day, most people are so caught up in their daily lives and the
Yeah,
hecticness of whatever it is that they're doing passionately
yeah,
because they want to succeed or they want, they want things, right? And so
yeah.
these things come up once in a while and it may not even get on their radar because they either don't live there, are not affected by it, are not even literate enough to say anything, to make a comment. because these
Yeah,
are
I
very
mean,
niche
I remember reading this great essay about how people are not interested in the environment if the price of eggs is high. And that's so true. When you're just busy worrying about putting food on the table, you know, whether or not
No, but not all of these
it's,
people have that problem, because transboundary haze affects more urban townships than it does the, how to say, the rural ones. Because when you have no trees to absorb or to filter
yeah,
particles in the air, it's literally lingering where you are and you're breathing it in and it's going to your eyes and it's making
yeah.
life
Okay,
very,
so
very
you raise a good point because I think that of all three of those things, that actually people can see. They can visibly see. Like I saw it. Like I think it was when was it? When I
We
first came back,
almost cancelled
it was so
unschooling.
bad that it was like we were in a mist and there was like dust on my plants and things like that. But I think when it gets to that but have you noticed it's not been such a big problem of the last few years?
Because many safeguards have been put into place.
Oh really?
Yes. So, okay, coming back to how bad it felt. Remember when we did unschool coaching? We
Uh-huh.
almost cancelled 1 week before unschool
Oh,
because the transboundary haze in
I remember. I
Borneo was so
remember.
bad.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember.
We
Yeah,
had a conversation with Leila and we were like, okay, this is the condition. If the API doesn't go below this number, we are not going to host unschool because it's not going to be safe for foreigners to
yeah,
be in teaching. And we're just so lucky that it cleared out in the last 3 days of our deadline. And the API went down to a very safe level. So we were not even playing with it because we knew that if we did bring people out and if it got the coverage that it was going to get, it would have been a hazard for the program. So
yeah.
yeah, that's how bad it becomes in Malaysia, depending
So
where you
it's
are.
actually quite interesting that it is reared its head in the last week, right? The
Yep.
Ministry of Education has just come up and said that if it goes above 200, they're going to have to close the school, blah, blah. So it's actually, there's
Yep.
something happening.
Yep.
So what is happening? Is something going on that I'm not really following it. Do you know anything about this?
I've not been following it myself because
Yeah,
just been busy here. But in general,
yeah.
I would say over the years, the schools have become a lot more articulate because parents are putting pressure on
Okay.
schools. So
Yeah,
schools are then putting pressure on state, and state is then putting pressure on federal. So it's a
yeah,
cascade effect. And the fact that kids are getting sick, that is your immediate indicator that this is unsafe. So
yeah.
when it happens to
Actually, and
children,
that is something that Greenpeace were working on because I remember, let's say maybe like 6 years ago or something, I remember Hang was really quite active trying to get better, the tool that's used to measure the particulate.
mm-hmm.
He was saying that they were not measuring it fine enough.
Yeah,
So the alarm was not really being rung correctly.
yeah.
Actually,
So
yeah, the problem is
there's many
you
indicators.
need
Yeah,
better receptors of the
filters.
problem.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So you could
So
use a light-based spectrum filter, which will literally, anytime there's a particle and it blocks the light, it calculates how much percentage of light is being blocked in that area. And then there are filter-based, particulate measurements. So it depends. And it depends on how low it hangs on the ground, from the ground as well. Because if you look at industrial, how to say, smoke pollution, the requirement to overcome um, releasing smoke is about how high your smokestack goes and how fast the smoke dissipates. So when you're talking about particulate filtering, you're also looking at how high it is from uh, the level that we live in. So if it's an area with higher density buildings, then the perimeters should be higher. If it's lower, if it's in a valley, what is the geographic location of the place? If wind is crossing in a particular direction. So there's a lot of measurements, but in
yeah.
general, as humans, you can smell it, you can see it, it tastes. You know?
Okay,
So
so I think
yeah,
like
that's also an indicator that's too bad.
let me just put a pin here because I think what's interesting here is we need to make it part of, since we are actually developing this notion of eco literacy, is I think people need to know a little bit more about air quality. Like, what does it actually mean? How is it affected? How can you read it? What are the problems? This is also this also correlates to our experience with COVID. Do you remember when we had problem with indoor air quality
Air
because it
quality. Yep.
wasn't being circulated? The air quality is an issue and it's I think part of the thing with our lane is, the question we ask is, are we thriving? What is the sort of basic groundwork for us
Yep.
to thrive? And, when do we need to know when to know to push back or ask questions or do something about it?
Yep.
So I remember at that time, Hank brought a whole bunch of these meters to actually read in Johor because he wanted to compare his reading to actually what were the government reading at the time.
Right.
So, and then I haven't really followed up or whatever, so I don't really know where we are with that.
Mm.
One related point to that, which I think is quite interesting, is even before that, when I went for this biophilia conference, which I've written about in Forest Thinking,
Mm.
uh, the panel was, they were all like Yale professor, Curtin professor, whatever.
Right.
But the Singaporean professor, I don't remember his name, but he was Nanyang. And he's actually quite a controversial voice in Singapore. He's very outspoken. And he said something that was actually really, it was there was a bit of an uproar because he basically was saying, oh, it's all very well you guys talking about biophilia and building all these beautiful cities, whatever. He says, but if Singapore isn't taking care of its neighbors, the poverty of its
Yep.
neighbors, we are going to get,
Ding 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 ding. Yes.
and I thought, wow, this is, and that goes back to our original thing is, we need to hear voices like that. We need those kind of that kind of articulation of problem, because everything is covered up in green wall covered hotels when actually none of that matters if you're living through haze. So the way you don't live through haze is you need some kind of um, international and economic policy that involves your ASEAN neighbors.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, and I guess that's what Greenpeace is working on. They are working with ASEAN parliamentarians to develop safeguards for transboundary haze.
Yeah.
So if
So I think
that,
one of the
so
things
they,
one is asking for actually more transparency and responsibility because, a lot of these problems are hidden behind corporate structures
yeah,
and the people that are actually ultimately in ownership of these hotspots are actually large companies like IOI and people like
they're
that,
all Malaysian too.
right? So this is actually an important thing. We have to know who actually is the problem. Is it a Singapore company? Is it a Malaysian company? What laws? Do we have correct laws to manage these people? Because they're just
Yep,
becoming very very rich on the
yep.
back of environmental and social
It's an
justice. Really.
externalized cost. It's just an
Yeah.
externalized cost. That's it, and it's cheaper because you're just open burning instead of hauling the logs or the bio waste into a center and burning in a furnace, filtering the air that goes out, turning it into briquettes or in ash or whatever it is that they how to say convert it into. But these are very how to say these are very solvable problems. It's just
Yes.
that nobody wants to pay for it.
Yeah. No one's looking at the problems and no one's trying to solve it because no one's really care. I think that's really the point of this conversation is really who should care, who should speak up, who should be.
I mean,
I mean,
the government.
ideally it is the government. Ideally, there are departments that are monitoring
But you know
this.
what?
And
The world is
yeah,
not ideal. Every
yeah,
country has this problem.
yeah,
Talk about Japan. Japan did this like in the 70s. That's how they came up with their Clean Air Act because people were literally dying
yeah,
of sulfur in the air. they had rivers which was so polluted that people were dying.
Yeah.
So they'd gone through that sacrifice the masses to get
Yeah.
economic development.
Yeah.
And then once they hit that threshold where they were earning the income that they needed to earn, they had the systems in place. Then they went back and did curative action.
They fixed it.
But
Actually, that's
yeah,
very interesting because analogous to that, actually, is something I was quite fascinated by reading it. There was recently an exhibition in London in Courtauld of was it Turner or Monet? I can't remember, one of them. There had been two exhibitions about impressionists, and
yeah,
what was really fascinating is actually they were actually starting to talk about how the impressionists were actually painting these beautiful landscapes that were actually because of pollution. Because of the particulate in the air, it
yeah.
was catching the light in a certain kind of way, and it was making for these beautiful paintings. So there were actually scientists uh, comparing the timeline they were measuring the timing of the paintings with actually the
Yeah.
problem. I know it was a similar situation. London was very, very polluted with coal,
Yep.
and they came out of it. They fixed it,
Yep.
right?
I mean, at
But
one point, people were dying of inhaling cotton dust because they were weaving cotton. So every country has gone through pollution. Even the people who used to paint the luminous marks on watches, they used to
all right,
lick the tip, the luminous paint on the watch face.
okay,
Watch, the
yeah,
face
yeah,
of the
yeah,
watch used to be luminous.
yeah.
So the women who used to paint that used to lick the tip of the brush so that it's
Oh,
pointy. And so they would dip it in the paint and
okay,
then paint.
okay,
And they would all have like their bones and their jaw and their nose like literally fall out.
okay, yeah,
Industrial pollution. Yeah. It's happened everywhere. But they
yeah.
put up safeguards over time. They change the materials over time. It's just that in Asia, we are just taking our sweet time to get there.
Yeah, so just to almost wrap this up as a section, we kind of need to think about this whole notion of air quality a little bit better. Like, you know, we need to have some basic, information out there. Like I think we should figure out how to teach this, with an understanding of what should you be expecting in air quality, what's being done about measuring it and what kind of things are in place for when problems arise, which is also part of something that is part of eco literacy is when do you have to have some kind of social function or activism about it? When does it enter a space that you need to do something about it? You have to start, you know,
So I feel like if you look at the Taman Rimba Kiara case, right? Not the case, like the landscape department issue, right?
Mm.
So the landscape department is trying to be a purist. It's trying to be the landscape department, and it's trying to design a botanical garden. So the word is design, and many or most botanical gardens were designed decades ago. So the reason why they feel they have a strong case to design the Taman Rimba Kiara garden is because that whole area used to be a rubber plantation. So there are lots of rubber trees. And now, I think maybe since the 70s, that the plantation has stopped operations. Many other trees have grown in that space. It's become almost like a semi-natural forest, which means it's got biodiversity. It's got fireflies. It's got a class 1 river like mata air. What's mata air? Mata air is a
the, the source of it.
source of water. It's got gibbon. No, not gibbons. It's got macaques, and it's got the cereal. It's got a whole bunch of different birds. It's even got like a resident hornbill there. And the thing is, right, because it's been an untouched development, it's a green spot. So a lot of these animals that have been displaced from elsewhere congregate in this area because it is a forest. Although it's got like maybe 50% of it is old rubber trees. But what the landscape department wants to do is to remove all the rubber trees and plant indigenous species and turn it into an arboricultural site. Not
Yeah, but
bad intention.
one problem because I also see here is there is one conceptual problem here is there doesn't seem to be a full understanding. And when you do something like this, you are actually, as the government, this is a public good. That means you pay for it, and then you pay to manage it, and then you also pay to activate it. That means you make it a living, active good. But what I see from the thing is, they do what they try to do here. They try to make it into a profitable site. You know, they want to put commerce in that. They want to sort of have it to pay for itself. And to me, that I feel like that's not a really a full understanding of what they need to, how they need to spend to get uh, infrastructure for public assets.
Yeah,
So, for
but
example, like the park, just to compare the parks in New York City, right? So the parks are built. The parks were built X number of years ago, but now the budget in the city is to maintain those parks and also to activate it. That means they are now actually hiring companies, and this is actually something that I would want. That was one of my original interests in working with these kind of things. Maybe I would be that partner for them. So there's a lot, and they're generally like landscape companies, stuff like that. And
yeah,
they activate it. That means they put programming in there. They manage the planting so that the planting has a point of view. Maybe it's interesting. Otherwise, you would have the kind of park that we see here. They're just fields. They're just padangs with some trees and a
yeah.
toilet
But
and
see, the point that we were discussing was why would they dismantle already functional green space
okay.
to build a botanical garden? So I feel like the intention is there, but they don't have to do it immediately. They don't have to do it everything at the same time. They can do it by zone. They can do it sequentially over the next 15 years. So if you took away all the trees, you would raise the temperature. You would have erosion. You would lose water source. You would
So,
displace the animals. You would, and I'm talking about snakes and lizards and spiders and all that in between, right? So the new things that they plant, they're never gonna buy like full age trees. They're gonna buy like half age trees, which are gonna be these little short things, which
yeah.
will take about 5 years to get have they stable enough to start growing. So I feel like the method of which they are discussing this, or not even discussing this, because I knew about this when I was in RA back in 2012, 2013. This is a long story. And then it got quiet. It got quiet because people were going against Taman Rimba Kiara land grab with Tengku Adnan and Mega Perkasa, which is a whole nother conversation. So landscape became quiet, and there was a series of contracts that were given out to, I think it was UPM, to develop the lake. So their angle was divide and conquer, develop the park side first with more eco-looking aspects.
So was there
We,
a
we had a stream
designer
that
involved?
ran through it.
Was there a designer involved?
I think it was UPM and some collaborator to UPM. I'm not sure who
Because
the
that's another
company.
difference. If you're going to build something, uh, something of worth and value in a big city, especially like capital city like KL, you
Yeah.
it should be of a certain standard, right? It should like Central Park was built by the most famous landscape architect of his time, Olmsted. Highland was one of the major international landscape designers,
You're right.
Steve Rudolph. It's like it needs a designed element. Otherwise, it's just the
It is
Jabatan
designed.
landscape
It
just
is
putting stuff.
designed. how great it all integrates, because we can't see the master plan. We only see what's on the board when they announce, okay, we're shutting down the park for 1 year to do these things. That's
Yeah.
all you see. You only see those announcements. You don't see the tender. You don't understand the brief. There's no context to this. I only
Yeah.
know about the botanical garden intention, the arboriculture intention,
Yeah.
from previous conversations, which is prior to COVID. So I know they've been working on this for a while. And I think there has been changes in how the people who work in the landscape department, and some of those people may have had experience in DBKL, which is the local council that governs that area.
Mm.
So I think there is some people want to pursue a particular goal, an aim of what the park could be, because they gain long-term legacy projects. But again, it comes down to what you were saying. Is this the public good? Is this a living public good? And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
at the end of the day, the intention is for these so-called little rock stars to become rock stars,
Right.
using public good as the vehicle to elevate their status. And it's very sad, because when you talk about anything that is public good, there must be public consultation. And in this case, in this land, there should be an LA 21 element, which is Local Agenda 21, which has all the sustainability guidelines. It requires private-public partnership. It should have what do you call that? Consultation, public LA 21, and then it should have the city draft plan as the basis of any engagement that they do. So one of the reasons why Taman Rimba Kiara, the lawsuit won, was because they did not follow, or they did not acknowledge the KL draft plan. So a lot of these legalities, yes, government should put in safeguards, but people who live there should also feel responsibility for their backyard and
Yeah.
raise the flag and say, hey, you know what? This does not look like something that we understand or that we subscribe to, because we live here, we reside here for our lifetime, and we want a park. We want a free public space where people can go and have that environment to de-stress and overcome burnout and exercise and be healthy. But if it becomes a chargeable park, if it becomes a overly curated park, then those values no longer exist, because it will become a recreation attraction for everybody who doesn't even live there. So people who live there won't go, but people who come from far away will come. So that's like another indicator whether the park's design was
Layla.
intended to engage the locals. So, but like what you said, lah, at the end of the day, if its intention in design was to
Yeah.
create something that is self-funding, then I
And
think
special. I mean, it makes me think of what is actually a great example of good design. It wasn't. It was Singapore actually, and it was at that talk. They had the architect. He's a Singaporean landscape architect. And he's the one that built that waterscape that is now quite famous because he's
which
attracted all these
little.
otters. All the otters come and live
Oh,
there
okay,
now.
okay, okay.
And it's
Yeah, yeah,
actually created brand value for Singapore. It's like it's
yeah,
something for them to talk about. People go there. It's different. There's something really interesting about that. And
yeah, yeah.
I think that's an important part about public. I think it should, the people who live in that city should fall in love with that asset, and they could
Some
go
things
there.
are just by chance, they just
Yeah.
happen because the right conditions occur. And I
Yeah.
think if his design had stated that, okay, within 3 years otter groups will occur and it
Mm.
will generate interest from the public, right?
Mm.
Then that becomes a KPI. And then if it doesn't happen, he's screwed, but what he
But the
what he
interesting thing was
designed.
that I think the original intention of that was more about water control. It was more like flood management.
Yeah,
So it's actually a very complicated piece of engineering to actually manage the flow of water. And
yeah.
I think maybe this was maybe a smaller part of the story. They didn't realize that this would be like the
Refuge
wonderful
for the otter.
spice that would, yeah,
Yeah.
that would turn it into something special. So, Yeah, I think that's something we've yet to see here is really parks being built that are really interesting, and then they become part of and we see in Singapore, parks now have become more general. You just see more and more smaller parks being built. They're now actually sort of, I just wanted to correct, our last conversation, you said that maybe there were no rules about development. Actually, they're quite strict rules because I knew, I actually ran this by someone who is worked in town planning, and there are actually quite strict rules here.
About
Something like something like 30% of a development must be green space. I can't remember what the exact
yes, yes,
number is.
yes. No, that's for
Yeah,
sure. But the
yeah.
question is, how do they create the green space? It could be the last
Yeah, and
boundary.
how can they push it back? Who they give it
Ah,
to? Who manage?
it
All that is
could
the
be like,
problem. Yeah,
oh, I'm the developer. I'm just gonna put a tree in front of every house that makes like a 10 foot by 10 foot for like 100
yeah,
homes, and that makes like 300 feet of
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
That could be it, or it could be a dedicated pocket park within a space. So the quality of the green space is not identified. It just says you have to have green space. It doesn't even specify that certain percentage of the floor must be permeable. Because if it's not permeable, that's what causes flood. Because water will always move to the lowest point. So these are things that they do have some policy, but it's not necessarily tailored for each development when they are reviewing the master plan. Yeah. So it's kind of like a very high level policy.
Mm.
So then the developers have all this creative leeway to design whatever they want into place. Or even not even creative, like budgetary, guides that they then want to minimize on the implementation of certain things.
So I mean, another thing is I think just knowledge of what is a good park. So we have, we do see them, and I think the general public is is aware of some. For example, they talked about in Johor that Saget Park being something that aspired to be the South Korean, is it Chongqing or something, where they turn this
Okay.
highway into a park, it turns into a river. But of course, it never turned out to be anything like that at all.
Mm.
It had the water was dirty. They had to fix it. They went back and it's nothing like that beautiful Chongqing natural
You're right.
space that it is. I think China is doing a really, there's some really nice,
Yeah,
actually
they're
some
doing
really
smart
nice
city.
looking parks. Yeah.
Yeah.
This, they spend money on the design. There's actually money being put into design. So they're interesting. They're actually competing. Cities are competing to have more interesting things. So I think that we need to see that here. We need to see that happen here where cities want to have great parks, that can attract people to come and live in the city or work in the city or invest in the city. That kind of thing. Okay,
Yeah.
so the
But
other
don't
thing,
forget your artist lady in Penang.
yeah. So let's move on to her. So that's another area of conversation,
Yeah.
which is this whole idea. Let's start with the idea of development because that's what it is. So they're being sold the story that, oh, we need to do this because we need to build economic development to support the city. Okay. But actually, if you look at the history of Penang and even the history of Malaysia, there was a visionary politician, Lim Chong Yu from Gerakan, who actually built the industrial estate that would become the seed of the electronic engineering in Malaysia, which is now, I think it's number two contributor to GDP. We have actually risen in the world in terms of uh, in the digital space, making components. Like now, we will probably be part of the infrastructure of making chips and stuff. All this kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
I don't think they got enough credit for having that kind of vision. And it was a kind of vision that didn't rob the city of
Yeah.
its environment or cause problems. It just planted a very important seed that is now really bearing fruit. So I think one thing that we need to push back on is this relentless talk about property development as being the engine of growth. It's nonsense, you know, right? Well, I mean, what are your thoughts about that? We can't keep building
So
malls and
many people jump on property development because when you do land flipping, you take like agriculture land and you turn it into commercial land. You pay a difference in the status of the land, but the price of the land also increases per square foot. So, for instance, oil palm companies, when their plantations are closer to towns and cities, they want to reduce the carbon footprint of a plantation. What they do is they take a mass tract of land and they convert it into a development. So then the carbon expansion is like curbed because they now build something on it. And it has a bigger carbon value because there's cement and logistics and other things. But then they don't get scrutinized in terms of like, having a plantation that's so polluting and stuff. So that's that issue. And then the question is this: how do you say carbon is polluting when carbon is a natural product? So the
Right,
question
what?
is, how do you say carbon is polluting when carbon is a natural product? It's a natural resource in
Sure.
the world, right? So then that's a whole nother conversation. But it's been flattened so much still to the point where we think carbon is like the evil one. It's about how carbon's being redistributed, and at what quality is it being dispersed. So when you talk about development and you talk about why there is an economic boom based on development, it is because people want to also let go of their land. So people feel like, oh, my property has got value, therefore I'm going to sell it to the highest bidder. So there is a responsibility both on the landowner as well as the person purchasing it to turn it into something else. And typically, like in Penang, your footprint is very small, so you're going to be building
Sure.
upwards. And when you build upwards, like what you said, you're cutting out views from people who've been built, who built behind you, before you. And they're probably older buildings as well, which means they're not going to be very tall. And the worst thing is when you have a high density population in a place, in a particular locale, and everything's going up, imagine all the cars that are trying to get people into that place without mass transport infrastructure. So if you are like Singapore and you have a very clear idea of how you're going to move people using mass transport,
Yeah.
whether
I
in
mean,
the bus or
it's a
by
very
the
well
train.
I mean, they are building
Yeah,
and
like
increasing
Japan.
the
Yes.
transit. Yeah.
So transit is the backbone of the city. It
Yeah.
pushes people out and it brings people in and it gets people across, but it also regulates how things are built. So your footprint has a density quotient. So how many units can you build on this particular footprint? And then that is calculated into the load of the train. And then that is it also in biology we use a term called branchiation. When you look at a river, a main river, as it breaks down into smaller rivers into streams, or how it feeds from a stream into a big river going out to the ocean, transport systems, electrical systems all use the same methodology. How do you disperse and build, And I think when we are looking at development, we're not looking at it from a holistic point of view. We're just looking at it from I have land, you want to buy?
Well, I mean, I
Then
think
you go, I have house, you want to buy?
this is essentially part of the problem. Is it's a very lazy way to make money as well, right?
Yes.
It's a cash crop version of making money, which has been our history here. They just want
No,
to,
but
they don't
in the
want to think
past,
about, they want to hire talent. They don't want to hire, I had a conversation, interesting conversation with an architect about this, an older architect, and he said when he first graduated and he was working with property developers, the property developers like, why do you want to waste your time doing all this design? You know,
yeah,
because
there's
people
so
are buying
many
the property
templates that you can just apply.
for the property value. Don't waste your time.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah.
Okay, then fast forward 20 years later, and okay, maybe you have to put a design because otherwise we can't sell the property now because there's so much property.
Just
You know.
facade design. It's not
So
footprint design.
now, architecture is becoming a little bit more important. So I mean, like you go to Iskandar, you can see, wow, the eco botanic spaces are so much nicer than because there is some more design. They're more thought out, developed. The master plan is more interesting. And now the new wave is actually the landscape design. You know, like
Right.
Gamuda is now talking about their landscape, and now all these are now. So now we're adding different levels of brand value to it, but it's slow. It's a slow
Yeah.
progress. So just probably just to look back to the Penang thing is, I think they should be as you say, the footprint is small. This why just keep going on this very lazy way of making money when there's other things. There's AI, and like right now the hot thing is data centers. Which also opens up a whole new can of worms as well. Have you been reading about how like is it in India that they changed the water table and something like that? I can't remember. Right?
That's a lot of impact to data centers. No, but the thing is, right, in Penang, um, uh, so this is a guy I know who wrote a book about how 10, 10 projects that could save the world from climate change or adaptation to climate change. Something, I don't quote me. I don't remember the book, but I know
Yeah.
the author. And one of the things you're saying is if you build a land bridge between Penang and mainland, and you use that land to create land,
Yes.
you
Yes.
cultivate
Yes.
that land,
Yes.
you know, then you spread out the load of the
That would
island
make a lot. It would make a lot more sense.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's been something that was actually discussed, not just because he wrote the book, but he
Yeah.
actually did have those conversations with people to see if it was a viable solution before putting it in the book.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that people don't realize, right? And this is the same when I was in Japan and I did my IELTS program. I did ask the professor at the time, like, so in the future, even for Japan, would you recover old buildings and demolish them just to turn them back into parks and into, low density housing because they have an aging population? And that was the topic that I chose to ask this question. And I think for an elder person of industry, he felt offended. He felt offended with the fact that you are now dismantling somebody's great work in building a small little township and turning it into a park. Like, huh? Why would you do that? But in our generation, we're just looking at recovery. How do you recover underutilized space? And you ask the same question when it comes to palm oil estates. There are so many palm oil estates in Malaysia. I think about 40% are underproductive, if not more. So when you say underproductive palm oil land, it is just land that's doing nothing. Literally, it's nobody's harvesting, nobody's putting fertilizer, but it is going through erosion. It is not doing anything for biodiversity. It is taking up, a forest space, like quality. It could be a regrowing forest. So can you imagine if we did that? Or if it's like, so people are talking about rare mineral mining. Like, why don't you start with those abandoned oil palm plantations instead of digging up a forest? Use those exposed spaces first before going into pristine, first class forests.
Yeah. Yeah.
So these conversations are not happening. Just like
No.
development, the conversation is just about, oh,
Where
you
where
are
should that where should that
anti-commercialization.
conversation be held? I mean, I would have thought that conversation to be happening should be being seated at the university level, right? Intellectuals and academics are starting to talk about these things. No,
I feel the best way and the most effective way is if our politicians, who
no,
are
but the
our MPs,
politicians need to get that into. I mean, they need to
yeah,
get that intellectual content. So I don't see that sort of pathway from because that's what universities are for. They're supposed to
yeah.
be
But the
developing.
people in universities are not really talking about these things.
Yeah.
Like, I know nobody in the universities are talking about these things. Like, none of my university, like, lecturer, professor friends. I have one who left UM to join USM, and she left because the social equity for her professorship was better at USM.
Mm.
So Penang has a history because it was one of the main, like, centers for the colonization, the British colony. So it had higher, I guess, ethical guidelines. And maybe that's why the artist that you mentioned has so much more awareness about advocacy from an arts practitioner point of view. Because
Yeah,
she's
I mean,
probably
she has two
inspired
avenues.
by
One
nature.
is actually Penang civil society is actually more robust in general. There's actually more. There's more NGOs. There's more private citizens who are actually just a lot more knowledgeable. I think she spends a lot of time abroad, so she also sees a lot more. She has sort of perspective and context. When she's also quite rich, so she owns the tropical spice
Right.
thing. Uh, And so she understands a little bit about, she understands the notion of environment and development, sort of thing. But I will put a link for people to read about it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, but
yeah, but
Penang's
and
development is not new lah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but don't you agree with me that the Penang civil society is more robust? You actually hear a lot more pushback from them. Their conservation groups are much more vocal. The heritage groups are
Then
much more
Island.
vocal. Huh?
Then Island, they have a very defined boundary.
Yeah, yeah.
There's
I,
not
I
much permeating their boundary.
I
So when they
remember
fight,
we
they fight.
I remember we tried to do that here in Johor Bahru based on this Penang idea. I think the Penang is something called the Penang Forum or something, and we tried to do
Mm.
something called the Johor Forum. You came for one of those meetings, just to have civil society groups having, because otherwise a lot of civil society groups sort of work independently of each other. They're in their own little silos, and
Yep.
there's no real broader platform for them to enact on. Just,
But Penangers
to
always have a lot of, like, if you think about the Penang Consumer Association, they've been around for
yes, yeah,
decades.
that's a good
You
one.
know,
Yeah,
they have been talking about everything from seed sovereignty to
sure.
organic to carcinogenic influences in daily life to politics of, like, just policy around agriculture and stuff like that. So they've been doing
Yeah,
it for a long time.
yeah.
This did
Surprisingly,
not just happen yesterday.
surprisingly in a much more elevated level than say KL. I don't see anything out of
No,
KL.
because
Right?
they were their schools, right? They were at such much higher quality than ours.
Is that right?
Because all their, like Saint Xavier's, Penang Free School, whatever lah, you name the school, the quality of teachers and stuff like that was so much better than ours. Yeah.
Hmm.
So basic education is very high in Penang. Or at least basic education in the past was very high in Penang. And Penang is sister states to Singapore. So they have,
Hmm.
it's more likely for a person to leave Penang to go to Singapore than to come to KL.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Uh, what about ASEAN? What do you think about ASEAN?
I mean, we have a non-intervention, like, understanding. You don't tell me what to do in my backyard. I don't tell you what to do in your backyard.
Yeah,
And then, but we stare at each other, and like kind of like
yeah.
we don't like that. So I think that
I mean, it should get a little bit more powerful, especially with this whole geopolitical thing with the U.S. and China. We are important now.
yeah,
Yeah,
we are stuck in the middle, and we need to find our own way of doing what we need to do within our interests. And I
yeah.
think in terms of, like, agriculture, I would say Cambodia, Vietnam, they're still very green. There's still a lot of their, how to say, rural areas are not plantations like ours. We became a plantation country. Indonesia is a plantation country. But you look at Cambodia, Vietnam, they don't really have that influence on them. I think Thailand has got more agriculture than plantations. So in that sense, when they do, like, a plantation, it is mixed crop. It
Actually,
is
that's an
water rich.
interesting dichotomy because in a way, we didn't do so well because we didn't do that. Whereas places like East Asia, the Korea and Taiwan,
Yeah.
they actually
Yeah.
focused on the agriculture part so that they would be food
But they
secure.
also worked on agriculture technology because they have
That's true
seasons
too. That's
and
true
they have
too.
challenges.
Yeah. So they ended up having something like 50%. They're 60 or 50% food secure, whereas we're dropping
Yeah.
below 30 or
Yeah.
something right now, right?
Yeah.
So I
And
think that
Korea
that's
produces a lot of food for Japan as well.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we could do a lot better because also we could also be innovative. You know, we the government could be more innovative in about rethinking nutrition and food. You know, and growing those things. Like I said, I'm trialing duckweed as a high protein source. I mean, there are ways of like developing uh, food products, putting it into the sort of public sphere. They could be doing that, you know, uh, but which they're not. I mean, when I have interacted with like Marty, I mean, I think you were telling me that they would, and I know that they do a lot of development of new ideas, or whatever. But they also spend a lot of time on like stupid branding and making things viral. Like they were trying to
No,
talk to me
because
about
they believe of all the things that they need to do, the strategy to generate income for the middle
it's
lower
sales and
class is
marketing.
to be viral. So
Yeah,
then they do that. They don't focus on uh, transmitting technology knowledge. They don't
yeah.
focus on providing access to certain. Like for instance, at one point, a lot of Malaysians were trying to grow mushrooms in small houses, like
Okay.
small mushroom huts.
Yeah, 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 I
Yeah,
remember that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the problem was at one point there was no marketplace, so people will grow them, but they will have no one to sell to. But instead of working in two parts, that means you work on the grower, you work on the marketplace, they put all their efforts onto the marketplace. And then
Yeah.
they had marketplace, but they didn't have enough growers. And then they had uh, build up of growers. Then they didn't have enough people who were making the seed bags. So they yeah, they're not thinking about it holistically. They're not creating the supply chain. They're just doing parts, bits and pieces, and then there will be a bump up and a bump down, bump up and a bump down. I just feel like they just don't have the stamina to do this kind of work. And
Mm.
mushrooms are very short lifespan. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the rate of growth, right? It's like 40 days, 50 days.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
they're also quite interesting nutritionally, and we don't have enough information about like they could be turned into different. They could be turned into products. They could be if more not there was more knowledge about it, it may be incorporated more in plant-based type meals. We just don't
Yeah.
do enough in this sort of
No, I mean, like
territory.
the variety of mushrooms that are available. Like when I was in Batu Pahat, we ate this weird looking, crinkly looking mushroom, but it
Yeah.
was really nice. And they made it into masa lemak,
Sure.
and
Oh,
it was, yeah, it was chewy and it was really satisfying to
yeah,
eat.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So, and that's it, right? It's finding textures and how to say ways of cooking
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes mushrooms don't really have taste. So then it is
Sure.
what broth or what mix are you putting into it to give it that, to boost what it's missing. What it gains what it has in texture, it may need a boost in flavor. What it has in flavor, it may just need to be how to say maybe like soaked into a broth, like
Mm.
making those big black mushrooms into like a chicken hot pot, for instance. So then there's all these strategies that
Or
they should,
burgers. They make great
yeah,
burgers
do
as well.
incubators to help people
Yeah.
figure out how to use them. It's not just
Yeah.
sell a product. So
Yeah.
I feel like
Actually, we can sort of loop back to what you were talking about your friend who wrote the book. If they did build that bridge, I mean, they could actually build this economic system where Penang is the hub and it can be enriched by this uh, mainland, which could be, agriculturally rich. It could be industrially rich, and really, instead of like piling on property development into
yeah.
this small footprint, right? Wouldn't
So
you
the
say?
idea was to build a dike between the mainland of Penang to the island of Penang. So you build a dike and you lay out like a SWOT
Yeah.
plan. Yeah, and that will be
Why
productive.
aren't they doing it? It's all corrupt, isn't it? I just read 55 minutes ago that Wan Eng, there's now proof that he got someone to open another bank account.
Oh,
That's
colorful politicians.
that's what's going on here.
So
So,
ridiculous.
okay. Let's how shall we wrap this up?
I think
Okay.
okay.
So
I think it's like it is important for you and me who live in a place to be aware about our backyard. To be
yeah.
conscious of what we feel is equitable and what we feel we need as a society. We need green spaces, we need clean waterways, we need clean air. These are
Mm.
basic things. I'm not unique by needing clean air. We all need clean air.
Actually, let's put that into context. So our first area of conversation was about air quality. So that's an area of knowledge, like basic knowledge that we kind of need to improve on. Especially since there's a lot going on around it. We are oppressed and threatened by air quality, by smoke. We have now discovered there are issues about quality of air in air conditioned spaces, closed in spaces. That could be a problem if you ever have another COVID type situation. So air quality is something that we need to know more about.
Yeah.
Then the other thing is when we talked about Kiara and stuff like that, it's actually about green space. It's about green spaces in urban development, right? It's we need to understand that we need those spaces. We Singapore has made that discovery a while ago
Yeah.
and are now building on it, and we haven't taken first steps towards really building a sort of development plan that actually is building more and more green spaces.
Yeah.
And then finally with Penang, actually, we're really talking about a more visionary leadership that can actually make big decisions, you
Yeah.
know, like what happened in the 80s with Garakan's Lim Chong Yu, seeding this electronic industry, which is now paid off in this incredible way for the country, never mind Penang,
Yeah.
you know. What is the next steps for that? I think what's on the horizon here is actually this whole data center AI thing.
Yeah.
I don't know and the things are moving so fast because I don't know if you remember, just 5 years ago, it was like, oh, we should teach our kids to code, you know, remember?
Yeah.
And now it's like,
Great.
you don't
Yeah.
need it. So what
It's
do we
just
need?
insane.
What do we need to do? Yeah. And that
Yeah.
requires visionary leadership to sort of kind of configure this.
But that's the thing, right? To turn coding into something in the classroom is not impossible,
Mm.
but I feel like I was talking to a homeschool group yesterday, and basically, I think kids below 12 now have no more hands-on activities in school.
Mm.
So they've removed the building aspect of like we used to have a workshop in school where you build projects. That doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
So these are things that are eroding the quality of education. And
Yeah.
so when you talk about coding, it becomes only available for people who have the money.
No, but my
And
point is,
that
it's not
is
even
social injustice.
necessary anymore. You don't need to learn how to code anymore. AI will do it for you.
Yeah. But the thing is, you still need a device.
Huh?
You still need a device.
No, then my point is, I think we need to know what is the next thing we need to be thinking about. Because the whole idea of thinking, we didn't execute it, and now it's over. That's how fast the world is changing.
Yeah,
right now.
for sure.
Yeah, I think that. I just want to say one last thing. Is I was just listening. It's related to a political thing. There was some talk about how the opposition sort of meeting with each other to form they don't know whether they're going to unify, blah, blah, blah. But that's not my particular area of interest. What I was interested in was that, what's his name? Arul Mogam or Arul Velam, the Party Socialist guy,
Okay, okay.
who's pretty smart, actually. I've always enjoyed when he speaks, you know.
Yeah.
He has a really good grasp of what is his role, what is his, you know, party thing. And he was talking about how he, you know, the only other party that they sort of see alignment with is Muda. And one of the principal things that they're aligned with, which I thought was very interesting, is actually state government, which is something I heard Berse talking about years ago.
Right.
That this is because, you know, we are all, everything is federal.
Yeah.
You know, all our state governments are all appointees, are all federal appointees. They're
Yes.
not state
Yes.
elected people.
We do not
So
have the third vote.
so so the one good reason to actually want Party Socialist Malaysia and Muda to succeed is that is one of their primary interests. You know, they want to develop state uh, state elected, which, you know, I mean, the pushback against that, and we actually have a prime minister who is talking about how he does not want to change Bumiputra policy, and that's all that. And what that is one of the reasons there isn't a state. They're worried that in the states, the non-Malay will actually start to elect non-Malay, you know, uh,
Yeah, but
officials.
when you start with divisive politic
Yep,
statements,
yeah,
you're going to
yeah,
generate,
yeah,
divisive politics action.
yeah. So
That's
that's
it.
where we are.
Because
That's where
when
we are.
people
We
feel
haven't
their
moved
interest is not
on.
being cared for, they're gonna do
Yeah,
it themselves. That's it.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's
I
like
think it's
it's
a
like the
big.
alien psychology.
I think it's a big ambition to want state level. So I think that, but this is something that I feel like the general public should be a little bit more educated on. You know, you know, to have more self reliance from a state point of view. You know,
Mm,
what do you think?
I don't know. I feel like I spent 20 years trying to be what I thought was a good citizen, like voting, participating in like birthday, questioning
Right,
why they do what they do, working with
right,
parliament.
yeah.
And then I feel like, was it
Burnt.
worth all that? Yeah, was it
That's what I
worth
feel.
all
I'm
that
like angry. I feel burnt, and like
apathy?
it's like, what do we do all that for? For this, for this guy to come on the club and talk it. You know, I prefer the Chris waving people. At least we saw them coming. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
And the thing is, in some ways I prefer Barisan National because I knew them. I knew what
Me
nonsense
too.
they would do.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like it's a you know you're evil. And now I don't even know what is the
yeah.
hell is going on. I'm so confused.
I mean,
Yeah,
basically, what you have is you have no change, and you have, you know, you see that all that talk about change is non-existent. You know, and also they're not really that great. You know,
yeah,
they're not that great. They're not that visionary. There's, you know, we're not doing that well. We're slipping behind the other ASEAN, you know,
yeah.
nations. Yeah, it's
I
time
don't
for a
know lah.
revolution
Yeah,
or change or something.
yeah. No, and coming back to the issue that we've been discussing is how do we activate people to participate in their own backyard?
Yeah.
It's easier to participate in your own backyard. It feels more worthwhile to participate in your own backyard than to participate in politics. Because at the end of the day,
What are the avenues, do you think? Facebook? Like, how do you do that?
I don't know, like, okay, so I live in TTDI. It's a very, it has its own bubble, So
Yeah.
we have two Facebook groups, but most of us are on like a WhatsApp group, whether it's in your
WhatsApp. Maybe
area.
WhatsApp. WhatsApp is
Yeah.
probably
So maybe it's in your area or it's across the whole of TTDI. Because when I was in RA, I was also in the RA group. And then there are also subs like, the church group, the masjid group, the Tamil group, so there are a lot of these subs. So I guess if you really care about your backyard, participate, not in all of them because it's impossible. You get like 250 WhatsApps a day, which is ridiculous.
sure.
But I was a member of the Residents Association that was part of the responsibility. But you can know one person from each of those groups and be genuine friends with them and understand their point of view of the issue that is at hand. So, for instance, if I was still living there and I had the time to go and meet up with some of my neighbors, the conversation would be, so how does the removal of all trees affect you? How do you
Yeah,
feel
yeah,
about it?
yeah.
And just getting everybody's answer on the same question, and you will get a bunch of different answers. And then you can say, hey, you know what, across the board, these are the things people are going to lose, and across the board, these are people's fears, and across the board, these are what people are suggesting that can be done as an alternative. So if you have a bunch of people discussing as people, as friends with mutual interests, then you understand, okay, how do we then curb this from being a runaway train? And then you start to say, okay, so can we push this idea to RA? Can RA have a conversation as the representative of our neighborhood to engage with Jabatan Landscape? And then RA will then have to do their part and engage on the behalf of residents. And then from there, Jabatan Landscape will have to give a reply to the questions, or to the, to meet the residents to answer or to show their plan. And then if it's really an illegal action, or if it could be, if you can be, if you can convince them through advocacy and say, look, these are other ways of doing it, or this is how we want to do it, or if it's a head-on fight and say, like, we're going to protest against the development because, and you have enough people to stand behind you. So for instance, like the case with Taman Rimba Kera, when they were trying to develop that area, we had so many people come and help. It wasn't just about running Earth Day. It was about people bringing hellers, people making posters, people calling their neighbors, people printing flyers for everyone. Someone printed T-shirts that people then bought. And all of these little actions looked totally unrelated to each other, but they built the movement. So not everything needs to be a movement that erupts in a court
So
case.
what happened to that? What happened to that?
So we won. It became a cornerstone case for
Oh,
the policy around referring to the local plan and
so
the
why has
local.
this reared its head again? This thing that's happening now.
No, so it's a different case
Oh, it's a
because
different thing. Okay.
it's different because the land that we are now discussing is already designated as a park.
Okay.
It is
Oh, so it's a
someone.
how are they going to develop? How are they going to do
Yeah.
it?
So the
How?
question, we know they have jurisdiction, but the question
Okay.
is, how can they do it without losing the biodiversity and the ecosystem that already
Got
exists
it.
there?
Got
So
it.
there are many ways to skin the cat.
Okay.
So so it depends on how you want to engage, and
Okay.
how long is it going to take to build the momentum for engagement to end.
Okay.
And we're all busy with our lives, and the more people working on it, the faster it moves, or the better we have, the better voice that we create. And yeah,
Okay.
there's
On
no
that
more
note, I
answer
think
lah.
that's a good place to end. I think we are
Yeah.
we wrapped it up this week.
Nice.
Okay. So maybe I'll talk to you tomorrow. You want to give me a call and we talk about your trip here?
Can
Yeah.
can do tomorrow.
And
What day
I
is it tomorrow?
think
Tomorrow's Friday.
no, tomorrow's
Thursday.
Thursday. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think Saturday I'm going to talk to Raghu, uh, and I'll let you know how that works
Okay.
out.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay. All right. Take care. Good
Bye
talking to
bye.
you.
Talk to you tomorrow. Bye.